Hi, this is Arthur, and this is a summary of the story of all the Trailblazer missions released on day 1 of the game Honkai Star Rail. Side note, the Trailblazer missions are the main story missions in this game. This game takes place in a futuristic universe where people traverse the stars. A space station is under attack from an army known as the Antimatter Legion. We are introduced to Kafka and Silverwolf, who are using the attack to break into the space station to steal something called a Stellaron. They successfully steal it and place it into a person who will serve as its vessel. Side note, going forward I will refer to this vessel as the Trailblazer. Kafka and Silverwolf leave, and the Trailblazer wakes up to meet Dan Heng and March 7th, part of the crew of a train-shaped spaceship known as the Astral Express. The Trailblazer does not remember anything about herself. The Astral Express crew has agreed to help defend the station in this attack. They go together and rescue Arlen, head of security, before meeting Himiko, another member of the Astral Express crew. They then meet Asta, the person in charge of running the space station. Asta explains this is the Herta space station owned by the genius Herta, a favorite of the Aeon Nous the Eruditian. Side note, in this universe there are godlike beings called the Aeons. Aeons devote themselves to a path, and those who follow that path can draw on that Aeon's power. Some more things happen. The Trailblazer is targeted by a Doomsday Beast, a creature from the Antimatter Legion. The beast attacks and they defeat it, but the Trailblazer then hears a voice of the Aeon Nanook the Destruction and begins to transform. Luckily, Welt Yang, another member of the Astral Express crew, knocks out the Trailblazer and stops the transformation. The Trailblazer then wakes up in the medical bay and goes to meet Himiko and Herta. Herta tells the Trailblazer about the Stellaron in her body, and Himiko invites her to travel with them on the Astral Express. The Trailblazer then speaks to Herta, who explains that the Stellarons are life forms spread by the Aeon Nanook the Destruction and cause destruction. Herta also speaks about a skilled group called the Stellaron Hunters who collect Stellarons. Kafka and Silverwolf are part of that group. They then talk to Asta, who explains that the extraction of the Stellaron caused a fragmentum. A fragmentum usually accompanies a Stellaron and is a corroded space connected to other fragmentums. Monsters can use the fragmentum as a gateway to invade an area. The Trailblazer then returns to the Astral Express and decides to join them. They meet Pom Pom, the conductor, and have a chat with Himiko. Himiko explains that the Astral Express is a spaceship created by the Aeon Akavili, the Trailblaze, who used it to travel the stars with his followers, the Nameless. Akavili has since died. The Astral Express now follows the path set by Akavili when he was traveling in it. Himiko also explains that the Aeons generally ascend from regular mortals, though much about them remains unknown. Many mortals also form factions, following Aeons and the paths they represent, and can use that Aeon's power. Paths are philosophical concepts associated with an Aeon. Those who follow an Aeon's path and draw on its powers are known as Pathstriders. Sometimes Aeons will directly bestow power onto a mortal, and these people are known as Emanators. Paths continue to exist even after an Aeon dies. We also learn that Himiko is the current boss of the Astral Express. Dan Heng used to work with an organization called the Shenzhou, though he's currently running from something, and March 7th was found in a block of ice and has no memory of what happened before she was found. The ship then travels to a planet called Jarello 6 to find their path blocked by a Stellaron. The Trailblazer, March 7th, and Dan Heng land on the planet with the goal of sealing the Stellaron and removing the obstruction. When they land, they meet Sampo Koski. Sampo decides to take them to the only city on the planet, Belobog, when they run into Gepard Landau, captain of the Silvermane Guards. After a brief battle, the Trailblazer explains that they are not from this planet, and Gepard takes them to Belobog. Sampo runs off. Gepard also tells the story of how the Antimatter Legion invaded the planet and a sudden blast of extreme cold froze the planet and the Antimatter Legion. Belobog stays warm because it is protected by the Aeon Clipoth of Preservation. Belobog is ruled by a group called the Architects and its supreme guardian Cocolia Rand. Gepard takes him to Cocolia. They tell Cocolia that there is a Stellaron on this planet and they can seal it. A side note, the Stellaron cannot be destroyed, but they can be sealed. Cocolia seems willing to help and offers them lodgings for the night. They then walk around the city and meet Serval Landau, a shop owner and Gepard's sister. Serval tells them about the overworld, which is the above-ground part of the city, and the underworld, which is the underground part of the city. For some reason, no one has been able to travel between the two parts for years. They eventually head to their lodgings when they are woken up by guards led by Bronya Rand, commander of the Silvermane Guards. Their group is accused of being infiltrators and they try to arrest them. They make a run for it and escape into an area of Fragmentum. Bronya and the guards continue chasing them when Sampo shows up and throws some smoke bombs, which knock them all unconscious. The Trailblazer wakes up in a clinic of a doctor named Natasha. They are now in the underworld. Natasha goes on to say that the underworld is the mining operation that powers Belobog. Living conditions here aren't good and have gotten worse since being sealed off from the overworld. A group called Wildfire basically keeps the peace in the underworld. The gang meets up and finds Sampo again, who agrees to introduce them to Wildfire. As they're heading over, they bump into Bronya again and Sela, a member of Wildfire. They then all head down to the mines to meet the head of Wildfire when they are obstructed by a bunch of robots led by another robot named Svarog. The gang battle their way through the robots and eventually meet Svarog and a little girl who accompanies him named Clara. Svarog and Clara leave and the gang eventually meet Oleg, leader of Wildfire. They tell Oleg they are looking for the Stellaron and Oleg suggests that Svarog might know about it since he is an artificial intelligence created hundreds of years ago. Later they meet with Sampo who guides them to Svarog's base. They make their way through and find Clara being attacked by some Fragmentum monsters. They rescue Clara and convince her to take them to Svarog. They meet with Svarog and he attacks them. Natasha then shows up and provides assistance. They defeat Svarog and convince him to tell them all he knows about the Stellaron. Svarog reveals that long ago the architects and guardians of the past knew that the Stellaron was destroying the planet, but kept it a secret since they could not destroy it. Natasha also reveals that she is in fact the secret leader of the Wildfire. With Svarog's robots out of the way, the group heads up to the surface with Bronya leaving first to confront Kokolia alone. They visit Serval in hopes that she can get them into the restricted zone where the Stellaron might be since she was a former architect and Gepard's sister. Using Serval, they make their way into the restricted zone until they get caught by Gepard. They somehow convince Gepard to let them pass. Serval and Gepard stay behind to hold off the monsters while the group continues on. As they travel on, they see images of Bronya and Kokolia and follow them. The after images reveal Kokolia's true plan, which is to allow the Stellaron to destroy the entire world so that it may be recreated anew. They eventually reach them and Bronya decides to stand against Kokolia. They fight, and with the assistance of the Astral Express, a giant robot made by the architects, the will of the past guardians of Belobog, and the gaze of the Aeon Klipoth, they defeat Kokolia and seal the Stellaron. Afterwards, Bronya decides to keep Kokolia's betrayal a secret and tells the populace that Kokolia sacrificed herself to seal the Stellaron and save Belobog. Bronya is now made leader of Belobog and lifts the blockade between the overworld and the underworld. With the Stellaron now sealed and the obstruction gone, the Astral Express crew say their goodbyes before leaving to their next destination. As the crew's deciding where to go next, Kafka contacts them and tells them that a Stellaron will appear on the Luo Fu, one of a fleet of ships that belong to the Shenzhou Alliance. The Shenzhou Alliance follows the Aeon Lan the Hunt. Kafka asks them to investigate and help seal the Stellaron. The crew talks it over and decides to go to Luo Fu. Dan Heng is the sole opposing vote as he is banned from entering the Luo Fu for some reason. They head over and the gate to Luo Fu somehow opens and the Trailblazer, March 7th, and Welt disembark. Once there, they find Tingyun, a member of the Shenzhou government, under attack by Marastruck. Side note, many of the denizens of the Luo Fu are long-lived species and immortals, and are susceptible to an illness known as Marastruck, which turns them hostile. They save Tingyun and find transport out of the area. Tingyun then introduces them to Yukong, a higher-up Shenzhou official. Yukong suspects them of wrongdoing and attempts to arrest them when Jing Yuan, a general of the Shenzhou, arrives. Jing Yuan then asks them to track down and capture Kafka while the Shenzhou deal with the Stellaron. The Trailblazer agrees. Meanwhile, Dan Heng finds something shocking in Kafka's transmission and heads over to the Luo Fu. Back with the Trailblazer, the group and Ting Yun track down Kafka when Fu Xuan, master diviner of the Shenzhou, shows up and captures her. They then head to the Divination Commission to divine information from Kafka. Some time is needed to prepare, so the group walks around and runs into Bailu, a Shenzhou healer treating some seemingly Mara-struck residents. They then speak to Dahao, a government official who suspects something behind the rising cases of Mara-struck. After finding some evidence of a conspiracy, Dahao introduces Qingzu, a higher-ranked member of the Shenzhou. Qingzu explains that Sanctus Medicus, an organization that follows the Aeon Yao Shi the Abundance, is performing medical procedures that turn people into Mara-struck under the guise of granting them immortality. Qingzu asks the Trailblazer to infiltrate the organization, and they do so. They eventually get their hands on some Sanctus Medicus medicine and give it to Dan Shru, a head alchemist of the Shenzhou, for analysis. They then get a message from Qingtre, another diviner in the Shenzhou, and head over to meet Fu Xuan. Fu Xuan then performs a divination on Kafka and learns that the Stellaron hunters have nothing to do with Stellaron, but the Trailblazer does. Fu Xuan then runs off and the Trailblazer talks with Kafka. Kafka explains that everything that has happened was foreseen by Elio, the leader of the Stellaron hunters, who can see potential futures. The Stellaron was brought into Luo Fu by someone else and is the result of internal strife in the Shenzhou. The goal of the Stellaron hunters was to lure the Trailblazer and the Astral Express to Luo Fu in order to help the Shenzhou and establish friendly relations. This is because a future event will require the Shenzhou's assistance, and so forming this relationship was necessary. Kafka does not say more about the future except that one day the Trailblazer will face off against the Aeon Nanook. We then cut over to Dong Heng, who is traveling through Luo Fu with a merchant named Luocha and a Shenzhou knight named Su Shang. They also save Shui, a judge for the Shenzhou. Cut back to the Trailblazer, and Kafka tells them about 3 ways to kill an Aeon. First, when an Aeon paths converge, the broader path Aeon will assimilate the narrower one. Second, Aeons can go to war and kill each other. Kafka also explains that long ago, the Aeon Yao Shi gave the Shenzhou immortality through a fruit of a giant tree called the Ambrosial Arbor. That tree is currently sitting in the middle of the Law Fu. Turns out that the immortality granted was actually the curse of being Mara-struck. The Aeon Lan the Hun then cut down the tree, and the Shenzhou now follow Lan in hunting down Yao Shi and eradicating the curse of immortality throughout the universe. Just then, Kafka escapes with Blades, another Stellaron hunter, and the barren Ambrosial Arbor sprouts to life, seemingly caused by the Stellaron. They then speak to Jingyun, who asks them to help seal the Stellaron. They then head over to the Artisanship Commission and meet Gongshu, a master artisan of the Shenzhou. Gongshu tells them of a monster that came from the Ambrosial Arbor's roots. They eventually defeat the monster and stop the spread of the roots. They then meet with Danshru to see the results of her medicine analysis. Danshru states that there is no cure for the procedure performed by Sanctus Medicus. The Trailblazer then goes with Danshru to check on a patient. As a reward for the errand, Danshru gives the Trailblazer medicine that will seemingly lengthen her life and make her stronger, among other things. The Trailblazer takes the medicine to Qingzu for analysis, and Qingzu finds that this is the exact same drug given by Sanctus Medicus that has been turning people into Mara-struck. The Trailblazer then confronts Danshru and learns that Danshru is the leader of Sanctus Medicus. Danshru tells him that taking the drug can potentially make you stronger or turn you into Mara-struck. Danshru leaves, and the Trailblazer reports this information to Qingzu. And that is the end of all available Trailblazer missions released on day 1 of Honkai Star Rail. If you like what you've seen here, please like, comment, and subscribe.